Hello and welcome to Independent Podcast Service. I'm Paul.
And I'm Dave.
And this week we're discussing the episode of Kolchak the Night Stalker, the Trevi Collection. So this episode originally aired January 24th, 1975. Let us start off with the number one song in America this week, Dave. Any guesses?
Shoot. I knew I forgot to do something for this episode. I never was thinking about doing some actual research into what was going on at around this time.
I will give you a hint. It is a song by the band The Carpenters.
And if I knew who the Carpenters actually were, it would supposedly help.
I know the name, I don't know any of their music. Anyway, it's a song called Please Mr. Postman.
Because on the one hand, that rings somewhat of a bell. But whether or not that's a misconstruing of someone using it in the clip of that old British TV show about a postman or something from the supposed past. But yeah, nothing that I can specifically recall.
It's also a cover, apparently, of it's like originally like a Motown song
Okay.
that they did a
No,
cover of.
no, I can see it with Motown.
Basically, everything that was popular in the 70s was from Motown. Yeah, that happened. Anyway,
Yeah.
number one film in America. I'm 50-50 on if you've heard of this one. It's a murder mystery. I'll give you that hint.
It's a mystery movie?
Murder mystery, yes.
Murder mystery movie. Supposed decent acclaim or kind of it was there but maybe only got like sequels later on.
That's a hard question to answer. It would have been very much critically acclaimed, but it's not. You can't really make a direct sequel. Well, I guess you kind of could, but there aren't really direct sequels to it. There would be other movies with this character, but not necessarily like a direct sequel.
With that, I don't think he had any particular movies. Yeah, I'm out of my element with this particular film genre. That one. As soon as you most likely say it, I'll probably know it. Whether or not I've seen it, though, would probably be the question.
You will. It is Murder on the Orient Express.
Oh, that's true. Because I can't remember how recently, at least a couple of months to maybe a year, but someone used a similar concept for either a TV series or another particular movie that they put on a streaming site recently.
Well, there was a Murder on the Orient Express remake. It was like just before the pandemic, maybe. With
Okay.
with who was the lead in that? I'm totally blanking on Homeboy's name. So there's one in 2017 that starred and was directed by Kenneth Branagh,
Hmm. Yeah, that's understandable.
and it was very good. I quite enjoyed it. And
That's definitely true. And it's another particular thing. It's one of those typical concepts that most TV shows, in some kind of respect, usually hit when they have a multitude of episodes. Usually, detective mystery on a train.
well, because it's a super good like location, because you can't people can't just like escape, right? Like you kind of confine all your suspects to one area.
Or, you could, but the things going at several miles per hour as you're going on the train probably wouldn't be nice. And if you're over a bridge, that's going to be one hell of a step.
Yes, and they also have a third film in theaters currently as we record this called A Haunting in Venice, which I really want to see because apparently it is much more spoopy.
Now, when worse comes to worse, you just turn the dial of one of the particular aspects in a higher direction.
Exactly. So, let us talk about this episode of Kolchak, the Night Stalker. Dun dun dun. Alrighty. So, Kolchak arranges to meet an informer at the Trevi Salon. But the man falls from an unoccupied top floor studio before Carl can learn what he knew. Now the mob is after Carl, and worse than that, so might be a supernatural force. A bit of research leads Carl to some people who might be able to help him. But all magic benefits from a little misdirection, and Carl has to correct his mistake before the real culprit's plan succeeds. Basically, Carl gets involved in the fashion industry and it attracts the ire of a witch. A witch, I say.
So, usually typical sort of issue, though, like earlier episodes, it kind of more so affects him a lot more.
Yeah, I enjoyed this episode a fair bit. I thought it was quite fun. I do like. Oh, fuck. I do enjoy that there's a bit of a misdirect in it where, like, you think the witch. They lead you to believe that the witch is one person, but then we find out later that it's actually the model, not the designer. I quite enjoyed that.
No, that's definitely true. And it's one of those particular concepts they play with a little bit within the episode. And it was definitely nice for a change of pace that they kind of went a little bit better with it, with the people or suspects that he interacts with. Usually the case, they don't manage to survive through what happens. But in technically this one, they both do. One not so much well as the other.
Yeah, so yeah, the witch technically survives, although she goes insane.
Yeah.
I do really like the effects, like when he goes to drown her in that bucket and she comes up and like she has like the blue on her face and the white hair. I'm like, that's a pretty cool effect for 75.
It was. And again, just dunking their head in a thing of dye. That'll work.
I don't know how they did that though, because her face was blue but her hair had gone white. And I'm like, that's, that took some effort.
Honestly, I think it was the case of a wig. So
Probably.
They went in, second shoot, they had the wig on her as they pulled her out.
Probably. And I was also like, hey, that looks almost kind of like my hair used to, except it was more silver.
Yeah. The additional thing was it's always interesting, especially with the things that they use to that sort of effect, having a cat as typical witch sort of effect, but especially with this one, dummies, because that is one of the aspects of horror that people have a real issue with.
Yeah, there's some mannequins that come to life in this one, and that's all. I'm a sucker for that.
And again, there's only so much that they could really do in the 70s. Again, either roll them along on a little standee or have the actress act them out. And in most cases, a lot of them did a very good job in statuette posing and whatnot. But in comparison to the kind of mannequins and other sorts of things you see in horror nowadays, it's nice it's kind of evolved, but maybe we could kind of go back to the easier set now with how creepy they are nowadays.
I also just, yeah, I really like the effects in this one, and I enjoy, like I said, like the little misdirect we get. I think it's a pretty fun episode.
Mm-hmm.
I have a fun little trivia note for you. So Carl complains about having to pay $10.95 for a book on witchcraft.
Yes.
So do you know how much that would be with inflation today?
Oh, God.
Take a stab at it.
I remember things right. I don't know, probably be pushing about 35 bucks, I think it is nowadays.
So you're going to say $35?
I'm gonna say that, but I'm gonna wait for the response.
It would actually be $62.50.
Ooh. And the sad thing is there's probably a book or two that probably would go like that, but probably not on witchcraft.
I mean, I've bought a few books that are that expensive.
Graphic novel wise, or more so of those big hulking books with an entire series inside of them?
I mean, I've bought like the first Fables compendium that I'm reading. That was like around 60 something bucks.
Okay, that's understandable.
I mean, it's a massive book. It's like 1,200 pages, but
about the size of it too, or something actually manageable?
Oh, I mean, it's big and awkward, but I love it.
Yeah.
Anyway, did you
You
ever?
know, if all else fails in an emergency situation, you could grab the book and smack him over the head with it.
Oh yeah, I mean it's also like for self defense. Did you have anything else about this episode, Dave?
I think the case was I had mild concerns with the additional subplot of some of the people he's been trying to chat with were additional informants, and one of them sadly got caught on the bad end of things. And after he passed on, the guys went to Kolchak and started to get on his sort of case. So it started to kind of affect him as well as the news uh, crew that was there, especially when they break in and wreck up the place. Kind of the case of not only is he dealing with the supernatural stuff, he's dealing with the mobster stuff too. But on whole, it was interesting enough with how everything was kind of paced along with it, and he managed to get out of it. But I was sort of had the thought, I wonder if this didn't exactly work out, how he would manage to get out of that situation himself.
I also do like because there's a moment where Carl's telling Tony that like the mob's like threatening him basically, and you kind of see you do get that moment where like Tony is concerned for Carl, where he's
He
like, Carl,
truly
maybe you
is.
should like drop this and move on to something else.
Hmm.
Which is nice because we normally see them like furious at each other, but there is like that mutual respect.
Hmm. It's definitely true.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed this episode. It's maybe not one of my favorites, but I definitely enjoyed going back to it.
Hmm.
So, if there's nothing else about this episode, next week we'll be discussing an episode called Chopper.
That could mean a multitude of things, sadly.
Oh, Dave, this is one of my favorite episodes because it has terrible special effects.
In a decent sense, the concerning sense, or I'm most likely going to have one hell of a laugh.
Okay, let me pitch you the premise on this. Um, you're familiar with um, the Headless Horseman, right?
Yes, with that story.
Okay. Now, if you were to modernize it, what would you do?
Let's see if
Well,
it
I
was
guess
that.
it's not really the Headless Horseman. I guess that's not. I guess it
Well,
kind of is.
well, it's one particular sort of concept that in the olden sort of days, having a horseman riding around in those sort of cases, once things kind of update with the particulars of uh, vehicle transportation, the next thing that you kind of go to is a motorcycle.
You're right, Dave. There's going to be a headless guy on a motorcycle murdering people.
Oh boy, and here I heard the particular news about motorcycles and their history with certain cultures.
But there's going to be some really cool guest stars and some really cool people working on this one behind the scenes.
Interesting.
So, yeah, it's going to be fun. It might not be the best episode, but it might be one of the most fun episodes.
Quite honestly, there's no real doubt to that because as time goes along, the motorcycle has an interesting enough history with the occult and spooky stuff that it can get into.
Alrighty. So, if there's nothing else, I've been Paul.
And I've been Dave.